Welcome, everyone, to Latter Daily Digest. We honor creators, and we're doing another in the series of shows about the Journal of Mormon Polygamy conference that happened earlier this year. And we're bringing on some of the participants. Jasmine is co-hosting with me today.
Hello.
And Jasmine, let everybody know about our guest.
Hello, my name is Jasmine, and we are super excited to have Clair Barrus. He is a fact checker extraordinaire online. I first came across Clair because he manages Today History, which is a fascinating website. So you can basically look at what happened, X amount of years ago today. So it kind of keeps
Today in Mormon history, right?
.com.
Yes,
.com.
it is. It's a really, really fun website. And I first met him at a Bicker Tonight meeting. So, that was really fun. So, Clair is a retired cloud platform engineer, and he loves skiing, hiking, and Mormon history. He's been featured at Sunstone retreats and academic conferences, including the Mormon Media Studies Symposium, the John Whitmore Historical Association Conference, and the Mormon Historical Association Conference. His publications are really cool. Some of them include Marriage Revelations of Joseph Smith, which is a chapter in Secret Covenants, Religious Authority, Sexuality, and Gender Roles of the Elect Ladies of the Early Republic, and Leland Manuscript Forgery and the Faculty of Abrac. And today he'll be talking with us about the law of lawless woman revelation. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about that, Clair?
Yeah. It's a really curious, kind of bizarre revelation that I ran across, and I read it and I'm like, what the heck is this thing talking about? And it's about that it's a revelation Heber wrote, and Heber C. Kimball, who is first counselor in the first presidency under Brigham Young, and he writes this revelation about that he is no longer under the law of lawless women anymore, and that he is free from these spirits, and that he is to devote his time. He no longer needs to give them heed, and he's free to go do other things. And I was just like, what is this about? So my paper looks at that and tries to unravel the mystery of who the lawless women are and what this revelation is about.
That's right. You say you came across it. Did you come across it in the Journal of Discourses, or were you rummaging through somebody's storage shed and came across it that way?
I found it in a book called it's called HCK's Memoranda, and it's a memorandum book that Heber C. Kimball had, and it has records of him crossing people crossing the plains, and who borrowed what, and who owes what, and who got baptized on this date, stuff like that. And they didn't realize that in the back of it there were a bunch of revelations that he had recorded in there, and then they discovered it, and it's fascinating to go through those revelations. So I was going through those on a different project, and I read this lawless women revelation. I'm like, I got to try to figure out what this is talking about.
Interesting. I assume it's not canonized.
You know what?
It's not canonized.
No, it is not.
No.
Exactly. Yep.
So that's really interesting. It sounds really cryptic. What with the spirits and what is the law? So it seems like you examined the textual history and the environmental factors around what the revelation was.
Yes. Yeah. So as I went through this memorandum book, I found two other items that had the same date, and they all begin with essentially the same sentence. One of them is only a half a sentence long, but it matches this other one. And then I found another one that also matches, kind of matches. Now one starts out and it says, Mr. K shall do this, and the second one says, my son Heber, he shall do this. And the third one said, the Spirit told me that I should do this. So they're all have a different voice and an emphasis. So it shows you kind of an evolving process going on. He apparently is trying to articulate this, and he's scratching one version, and then he does another one, and then another, and each one grows in length, and you
Interesting.
learn more as you look at the longer ones. There's more clues in those.
Interesting. And what year was this written?
This is February 3rd, 1852. Is what it's dated. Yes.
So did he ever talk about it over the pulpit, or was it just a revelation for him?
I'm not aware that he ever mentioned it anywhere else, or that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And is that just before Section 132 was made public, or just after?
That was, I think that I wanted to say 1878, but I don't think that's the right date. No, this would have been a decade or a couple of decades, or I don't know, before that. This was definitely quite a ways before that.
I suppose I tied in Section 132 as the church's announcement that they were doing polygamy, and that they did have.
1852, they announced it publicly for the first time.
Okay.
And so this would have been a year later, 1853.
Okay, because my assumption is they announce it. They know what Section 132 is before anybody else does. They know that there's this revelation from Joseph Smith, and they're keeping it secret, but they're announcing publicly now that they started practicing polygamy. I remember having conflicting, I'll say, elders quorum accounts, depending on who is teaching, that, there's a quote from Joseph Smith: "I'm accused of having 7 wives, and I look around and only find one," which then tells us that Joseph Smith didn't practice polygamy. He loved Emma so much. And then other accounts where, maybe it wasn't so blatant that way. Maybe it's nuanced. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, or whatever. And it makes sense to have somebody teach that Joseph. I heard another lesson was the angel with the flaming sword was actually when commanding Joseph to write down the Section 132, even though Joseph Smith didn't practice it. And so that's sort of conflating two different things as well, right? The angel of the flaming sword is like some other story even. And so anyway, hearing those two things makes history even more fascinating, when it just depends on what teacher you get, on what version you're going to get. And so I also wanted to bring to our audience's attention that Clair has been on Latter-day Daily Digest before, and we pretty much said, meet Clair, and we got to know him as a data processing person in the late 70s and early 80s, which is what IT, or whatever they call it now, was called. And so anyway, we'll include that in the description. And so how long have you been working on a paper, would you say, Clair? Thinking about presenting it?
So, I was actually working on, maybe 13 or 14 years ago, working on the Oliver Cowdery's divining rod that he had. And actually that was my first Sunstone presentation, was on that. And as I continued to research, I found out that Heber C. Kimball also had a divining rod it sounds like it came from Joseph Smith. And so I started, so that led me to Heber C. Kimball, and yada, 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 went down that. And I did a paper on the Lawless women revelation. I don't know if it was 10 years ago, but I did a paper, and then it's been collecting dust. And then I was talking to Cheryl about this conference, and she said, you ought to do that paper on the Lawless women. Like,
brush the dust off.
Yeah.
So out of the dust came your presentation, we'll say.
Out of the dust, yes. It spoke from the dust.
Spoken from the dust.
Yeah. So I'm curious. So how much was Heber using this type of magical world thinking? Do you think that had to do with this revelation, or?
It may have. So Oliver Cowdery had this rod, and there is evidence that Brigham Young and Orson Hyde also had a rod, and
Mhm.
Heber C. Kimball. And if those three apostles had rods, you kind of wonder, well, maybe all the apostles were given one. I don't know. But
Mm.
Heber dreams about this a rod before he has it in 1837 while he's voyaging across the ocean to be the mission president at the first foreign mission in England. And and he dreams that Joseph gives him this rod, and the rod guides the ship through all these obstacles. It's got
Oh,
this power
wow.
to guide him. Well, so and there's a fascinating story about this dream and how it later becomes a vision, and that's another paper I might do.
Wow.
It's really quite fascinating. But then he comes back, and it looks like well, Joseph apparently gave him this rod, and
Mhm.
in his journal, in Heber C. Kimball's journal, in early June 1844, before Joseph Smith is killed, Heber records that he received a revelation through the rod, and so
Oh,
he starts getting revelations through this rod, and there's quite a few of his revelations. It said, and so what he would do is he would dress in his temple clothes, he would offer up the signs of the priesthood, and then he would kneel down with this rod and ask, pray, and then he would get an answer. And he said, sometimes I would get an answer from the rod before I even got the question finished, you know. So
wow.
so he sometimes he mentions that a revelation came through the rod, and sometimes he just says, I got a revelation, and you're wondering, was he using that rod or not, you know? And so
Wow.
the Lawless
Fascinating.
women revelation, it doesn't say anything about this rod, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if he used the rod to receive this revelation.
I remember hearing about
Fascinating.
rods and stuff, and thinking it was like water witching, where you
Some
Yeah.
use
people use it
a
for
rod
water witching.
to
Yeah.
sort of see where to dig the well, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. It was used for water witching, finding minerals. Miners used it, and then there was treasure seekers that also used rods to find
Yeah.
buried treasure. Joseph Smith Sr. Uh, he used a rod, and probably Joseph Smith Jr. for a little while before he got his seer stone. Probably
Wow.
used a divining rod. So, yeah, and then of course Oliver Cowdery, and there's a whole backstory with Oliver Cowdery and his family's use of divining rods to receive revelations, and that's a
Mhm.
fascinating story. We don't have time to go into it, but
That's right.
and
That's
I should just
interesting.
point out for Sunstone this year, I just submitted a proposal. If it gets accepted, it'll be on Isaac Bullard, who was a prophet that lived up near Oliver Cowdery. He had a divining rod that he used, and so I'm going to kind of tell the story of Isaac Bullard's divining rod.
I've
That's
seen,
interesting.
I've seen
Yeah.
pictures of Joseph Smith's seer stones. Do they have pictures of the rods anywhere?
No, no, they don't. Yeah.
And I suppose it's easier to hide a seer stone in your pocket than maybe a rod. Got a seer stone in your pocket, or you're just happy to see me?
Yeah. My
I'm
great
not going to
grandpa,
go
he
down that
actually,
road.
yeah, my great grandpa, he actually had dowsing rods, and
Oh, yeah.
yeah, they found a well, he found a well, and my family, they built their houses around that well, and it still exists till today. And
Wow.
my grandma, very LDS woman, she swears it was because of Heavenly Father's intervention through this rod and the
Wow.
magnetism in the earth, and so
Yeah.
that's fascinating.
Wow. That is fascinating. Wow. That's cool.
I'd
Yeah.
have to say a lot of hydrologists nowadays would just say, well, there's a water table, and wherever you are in certain areas, if you dig down 37 feet, you're going to hit water.
Gonna get a whole
That
well,
As far as the land you can see the land can see, right?
the well of living water.
And so,
that's right.
but I assume sometimes you dig down and you hit the bedrock, right? And so you don't get water. So it just depends on what geology is
Right.
around.
Exactly. You hit some clay, like in Utah. You just hit
Right.
clay.
Yeah.
Right.
And so then Cheryl said to dust it off, and because she said, "Lo and behold, God has told Michelle and I to commence a Journal of Mormon Polygamy," right? And we need participants.
Yeah. And let me say something about that. So I believe Joseph Smith was a polygamist. I'm on that side, and I've spent a lot of time on the Hemlock Knots group debating different points. And I have to say I'm not I haven't listened to Michelle's videos, and so I'm not up to date on all of her arguments. But I am a proponent of scholarly material being presented that goes through peer review, and if the arguments are good, solid arguments, then they should stand. And if flaws are found by others, then we should reject those. And I believe that that's what scholarship is all about. And so I support this this endeavor, and I hope it is productive, and I hope we see truth come out of it.
That's right. It's bound to lead to better scholarship.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good thing.
I think also getting everybody on the same page, like we know his scientific methodology, the 6 steps or whatnot, but what is historical methodology? And to kind of get everybody on the same page and get the whole public like educated about how it's more like detective work, kind of like playing the game Clue. If it didn't happen in this room or without this weapon, and kind of how historians think. And most people don't have training, and college is a privilege. It's expensive, it's time consuming. And so this journal, to be able to open it all up so we can have this conversation, is a blessing for, I think, the whole conversation.
That's right. And there were several things at the conference that were, I think, just purely educational. Well, Don Bradley's presentation was an excellent example of historical detective work. And it was on Andrew Jensen's list of plural wives and Eliza R. Snow's influence on that. And he told a fascinating story of how he's got a clue here and he found another clue there. And I thought that was great, a great example of it in work. And then Mary Ann Clements gave a great overview of here's ways to research and sources to go to. Mm-hmm. That was great. And then I went up to the University of Utah before the conference. They had a little pre-session that some people went to, and we got to look at some of the artifacts, an 1830 Book of Mormon and a whole bunch of polygamy documents. And I think all of that this is how it works: the research, the scholarship, the methodologies. And I think it was great. I really enjoyed all of that out of the conference.
That's right. And the debate might bring interest to younger scholars and get their curiosity piqued, and maybe bring on a whole new generation of historians and scholars and stuff to that. And so
they're interested in it.
Yeah. And so you mentioned other presenters and stuff. So you stayed for the whole conference, right?
No, I actually arrived late and I had to leave early. Okay. So I missed some of it.
Okay.
Especially the Saturday afternoon I had to leave during Todd Compton's presentation.
What'd you think of the number of audience members? Were you impressed?
Oh, yeah, there was a really good crowd.
Yeah.
Yes, this
I don't know,
movement
Jasmine.
has really. Yeah, go ahead.
Jasmine, do you know how many were there?
I want to say about 300, a little over 300. Yeah. We had a good spread. We had mainstream, and then we had some disaffected. We had Community of Christ or Doctrines of Christ. We had fundamentalists. There was a good amount of actual people who believe in polygamy and live polygamy. So yeah, we had a really nice spread, and everybody was so pleasant. So nice to see people being so kind to each other.
Yes, right. The very first presentation, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he talked about
Being nice.
civil and
Yeah.
nice and listening to alternative viewpoints. And I did get a kick
Yes.
out of the next presentation. There was several viewpoints, Michelle Stone being one, and she would say her views, which were that Joseph Smith was not a polygamist, and then people in the crowd would cheer and applaud, and it's kind of a little more like a sporting event. But I never heard anything nasty or mean or angry, and I thought that was awesome.
That's right. It was Jerry Spanos.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
I think he spoke on disagreeing without being disagreeable.
That's right.
Yeah.
Michelle and Cheryl.
Great way to,
Yeah.
good way to open up.
It was really good. We're going to have him on too, I hope.
Okay.
And Michelle and Cheryl were joined by Maxine Hanks talking about Emma Smith.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
And then Barbara Jones Brown talked about some sort of cover-up of post-manifesto polygamy.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. She made the point that there's been a lot of lying about post-manifesto polygamy. And if those church leaders were not honest, we can also assume that Joseph Smith could have not been honest. She kind of opened the door that we need to open our, make room for that argument. Was kind of her point, as I understood it.
I mean, it doesn't seem like such a far stretch to me because, I mean, people, it's 2025 and people can't handle poly-related relationships today. So it's not too much of a stretch to me to think that Joseph Smith couldn't be open about it. My 2 cents. My 34 cents or how many wives he had.
The Americas were experimenting on lots of things. In the Americas, they experimented with democracy. They experimented with free love, all kinds of things. There were hippies that were our great-great-great-great-grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. In fact, I asked people, name so you have the Second Great Awakening occurring in the burned over district. A lot of religious stuff and utopian groups emerging. I always ask people, tell me one where there wasn't some kind of experimentation with marriage and sexuality.
Yeah.
And there might be, I'm not saying there are none, but the majority of them were. And so I think that's a point that people need to consider, I think,
That's right. Even the Shakers were experimenting with not having sex at all.
Yes, exactly.
Which is still a sex cult. Sort of not one that I would
anti-sex cult. Yeah.
That's a hard no for me. A hard pass to remain celibate the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead, Jasmine.
And to think of the ethical implications, if Joseph Smith wasn't a polygamist, then all of these women who said that they were married to Joseph Smith, what does that say about their voices? And I really appreciate Michelle for bringing up those conversations.
Yes.
And the deeper conversations about, like, is God a polygamist? Like, what is our actual theological marriage model here? And so it really is grappling with the core of our religion. So
absolutely. And a lot of women, and I have a person in the neighborhood that talks to me on a regular basis, and they're kind of terrified that when they pass away, they're going to be forced to be married to the person they were sealed, and then there's the fear: what if there's other wives involved? And that's it's not a trivial concern,
Yeah, I do run polygamy support groups for LDS women and non-LDS women, and I actually, unfortunately, I do hear a lot of circumstances where women are terminally ill and they set aside their friend to marry their husband after, and I mean that's just, there's lots of situations, and so I think I just think it's wonderful that people are having this conversation and bringing light to it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And no matter how much they try to bury the word Mormon or bury the fact that polygamy was important in the founding of Mormondom, or that there was blatant racism in Mormonism's past. Anything that brings to light the fact that polygamy was a major part of what made up the religion is good to me, because it just shows it's clarifying the issues. It's, having full disclosure and informed consent for anybody that wants to listen to those things. And if they're already in, to stay or leave, they have free choice. And for people who are investigating different religions, so that they have the most amount of information they possibly can. Mm-hmm. And these types of things bring up more information and also new ways to look at past information that we've maybe took for granted in prior years. So thanks a lot, Claire, for coming on our show.
Thank you, Claire.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's fun to chat with y'all.
Yeah, and we'll stay on afterwards for a little bit, but I just wanted to let our viewers know that to like, share, and subscribe, and to be sure to look for other episodes in this series, and to visit our channel early and often. It's way better than voting. But anyway, everybody have a great rest of 2025.
Bye-bye.